Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this special meeting of the Board of Education at the Poway Unified School District. It is Tuesday, June 5th, and the time is 6:09 p.m. If you would like to address the board on any agenda item, please complete a speaker slip and submit it to the executive assistant. You will be allotted 3 minutes to speak on that agenda item when it comes up. As this is a special meeting, we will not be taking comments tonight on non-agenda items as we do at our regular meetings. If you have any written materials for the board to review that would provide more specific information, please submit them to the executive assistant. With that said, welcome and thank you for coming. Would you all please join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance. Thank you very much. I will now report out of closed session. Mr. Sellers.
Closed session began at 4:40 p.m. Board of Education took the following action in closed session pursuant to item 2.5A in the matter of public employee discipline, dismissal, release, reassignment, resignation, non-reelection, certificated employee. On a motion by O'Connor Ratcliffe and a second by Patel, the board voted, hold on, second page, to approve and accept a resignation agreement with a certificated teacher, employee number 522223, including continuation of extended sick leave, placement on administrative leave with pay, a resignation effective October 31, 2018, and a release of all claims on the district. The vote was unanimous. In the matter of item 2.6A, public employee employment, middle school principal. On a motion by Patel and a second by Beatty, the board voted to hire Crystal Brownlee as principal at Meadowbrook Middle School. The vote of the board was also unanimous. No other reportable action was taken during closed session, which adjourned at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. Please take note that all members are in attendance at this evening's meeting. I have down here as agenda item 3.4 to provide the welcome to the public, but I don't have a script. That's okay. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. No lengthy script needed. We covered the portion about if you have comments, you want to get them in, get the comment cards to the executive assistant. Thank you again for coming. That brings us to item 4.1. We have several items on the agenda this evening that are public hearings, and so we're going to begin with item 4.1 and open the hearing. Actually, I will have Associate Superintendent Robertson introduce the item, and then we'll open the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight is our first reading for the 1819 Local Control Accountability Plan and the Local Control Funding Formula. If you could open this up for a public hearing, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Dr. Robertson. We will now open a hearing on this at 6:11. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak to this item? Mr. Sellers.
Well, let's see. Yes, the first person wishing to speak on the LCAP is Mariah Baugh, or Baughan, I'm not sure which. Sorry.
Hi there. My name is Mariah Bond, and I am a proud alumnus of Poway High School. And I'm also a physician at Scripps Hospital, and I'm also the San Diego County chapter leader for the organization Start School Later. And I would like to talk about LCAP goal number 3, which is on page 39. The goal is strengthen safe, healthy, positive, and attractive learning environments and experiences for all learners. So I wanted to talk about healthy high school and middle school start times. For several years now, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the Centers for Disease Control, as well as many other medical organizations, have all recommended that secondary schools start no earlier than 8:30 a.m. Poway is doing okay in the middle school area. If I were grading, I would give them a C. They've got 2 schools that serve middle schools that start at 8:30 or later, 2 that start in the 8:20 range, so almost there, and 2 that start at 7:40. The high schools are failing, with only 2 starting in the 8 o'clock hour and the other 4 starting around 7:30 or 7:45, so it's quite early. The recommendations for starting schools at 8:30 or later is founded in biology, as we've learned that the adolescent circadian rhythm shifts later in adolescence when they hit puberty. There's a large, broad, consistent body of research confirming that starting secondary schools too early in the morning is unhealthy, unsafe, and counterproductive. In fact, San Diego Unified just passed a resolution last month that will aim to implement healthy school start times in all of their high schools by the year 2020-21. I've given you the same Q&A that I gave to the San Diego Unified School Board, so except for the little places where it says San Diego Unified, you can cross out that and put Poway, and then the numbers of the students is a little different, but everything else should be the same. I already had copies, and I'm a little bit of a stickler for wasting paper. So anyway, as you look through the Q&A, you can see that there are extensive health, learning, and mental health effects, as well as safety issues with chronic sleep deprivation, which is what happens when you force kids to wake up for classes that start at 7:30 or so. Setting safe parameters for safe, healthy sleep hours is just as appropriate as establishing standards for the number of days or hours children are in class, or school health laws, or requirements for nutritionally adequate school meals, or vaccine requirements, or water safety training in our high schools. I urge you to take action to offer solutions to allow our teens to get adequate sleep for maximum health and performance. While it may not be convenient for some, and it will certainly require extra work by you all, healthy school hours most certainly applies to the LCAP goal to strengthen safe, healthy, positive, and attractive learning environments and experiences for all learners. How can we call a learning environment that requires chronic sleep deprivation healthy, positive, or attractive? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers to this item?
Excuse me. Yes, the next speaker is Janet Latang.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Kim Phelps, Superintendent's Council, and Board of Trustees. I'm here this evening to comment on the 2018-19 LCAP, all 212 pages. Okay, I only have 3 minutes. Okay, first off, thanks to all involved with pulling the LCAP together. I appreciate all your hard work, truly. All of you, thank you very much. Okay, to provide a bit of a summary, in the current draft of the LCAP, 37% of the 18-19 LCAP budget is for certified salary. 10% of the budget is for classified salary, and 17% of the budget is slated to pay benefits. So, totaling those up, that's 64% of the total LCAP budget that's going to salary and benefits. So, that leaves the rest of it for books and other, let's see, books and supplies, services, and other operating expenditures, capital outlay. Okay, goal 1 is the largest goal at almost $15 million, 36% of the LCAP budget, and that's support teachers in the implementation of the California standards. And I'm not going to go, it's in your handout, you can read. Goal 2 is the next highest at $11 million, 26% of the budget. Goal 3 is also around $11 million, 26% of the budget, and that's taking into consideration plans to improve security across the district. Thank you very much for that, those plans. Goal 4 is the smallest at $1.3 million, and that's 3% of the LCAP budget. And goal 5 is $3.8 million, 9% of the budget, collaborative learning structure and system for adults and students. Some of the things that we've got coming up, new campus security for middle schools. Thank you very much for that. Made note of that. The Mandarin program is funded for just this next year coming up. Let's see. I saw that there's increased teachers for summer school and alternative learning opportunities. Thank you for that. Online learning, new directions. Also looking at with Palomar. Classified development opportunities, a large investment to help professional development for our classified. Thank you. And also, my hope is that through the investment in goals 1, 2, and 5, our teachers and staff will increase student engagement of all POSD students, TK-12, to increase college and career readiness of all students. We've got a big budget increase, and I just want to let's be inspired to make that work so that we can increase our mastery of English language arts and mastery of standards for math, and so that we will hit all of our goals this next year. We've got the budget for it, and you can see what those are in appendices B and C if you want to see what we had last year, and let's hope we hit all the goals. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Melissa Lazaro.
Good evening. I just want to say thank you to all of the board members who have met with me and some of my local community members over the course of the last month. We've met with each of you individually, and your time is so valuable and appreciated. So thank you for that. And Jennifer has extended time to me as well, and we look forward to meeting with you next week, Dr. Phelps. So just a few questions, and this is on behalf of some of the parents that I've spoken with that weren't able to be here tonight. Asking questions about the numbers that we came up with for our LCAP analysis. So, where did we come up with those numbers? How was that reported? How was that calculated? I know that at some of the school sites there was plenty of POSD employees, but maybe only 1 or 2 parents. It was a bit confusing for some parents when they were called community forums, and then in small writing it was LCAP. So parents didn't really know what was happening. When you have communities like Chaparral that are a very tight community, parents show up. When you have other communities that doesn't have that kind of culture, parents didn't show up. And so when we're looking at this analysis and we're looking at these results, it's like, are the voices of the community truly represented here? I read through the entire report as well. And I just, I saw some real big themes there that didn't seem to be matched in the budget, which I'll comment on later. But, I consistently through the report, it was teacher training, right? Teacher training, teacher training, teacher training. Teachers want this, parents want this. They want to support the teachers in that. In every facet, it seems like they want training. And so I'd like to know, how is that being reflected in our LCAP? How is that being accomplished? On several pages, RTI, response to intervention, was addressed. So there was even a staff member that asked for, how are we dealing with this assessment? Are we building a plan for this? We want help in looking at these assessments, in creating a plan for these children. So how is the LCAP addressing that? Help with LA adoption and training in regards to that. Goals of having tech goals. So how is that being accomplished? So on pages 14, 15, 16, 19, and as well as on page 44, when there was a call for greater support of special ed and aides, obviously I look at a lot of this and it's close to my heart, which is reading, right? Which is literacy for all children, not just kids with reading difficulty, but what are we doing for the top 10% as well to challenge them? Obviously, the social ramifications of not addressing those that can't read at every grade level has a lot more social consequence. And so how are we addressing that in the LCAP, especially when page after page after page is calling for this type of training, not just for reading and literacy and RTI, but in all areas? Thank you.
That concludes the speakers on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. Associate Superintendent Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we have a presentation on the first reading of our LCAP plan. At this point, what I would like to do is bring forward our team who will be first and foremost in presenting the whole plan. One of them is Mercedes Hubschmidt, who is our point person. She's a director in Learning Support Services. Joy Romero, who is a director in finance, will be helping us with all the numbers, and Doug Johnson, who's the executive director too from Learning Support Services, and he's going to bring forward all of the metrics and the data that we have used throughout the year to reflect this. So the outcomes that we hope for today are the following. It's really, we are going to bring the budget and the learning pieces that are coming forward. What we want to remind you is this is our second year of a 3-year template of actions and services. We have had a new template every year. We think this is the template that's going to stick, and so we'll be able to follow our progress through this. At this time, we have had our DAC and our DLAC, which is our parent group, actually spend time the other evening, May 31st. Is that right, Mercedes?
Correct.
Going through the whole plan, asking questions, providing feedback. We actually have all of that feedback. We just culminated all of that. And Dr. Phelps will, as part of the LCAP plan, will be responding to all of those, and we will be providing them for the public. That does get published along with our plan at some point, so we have that parent input. The other thing is a first reading. We also have the whole month for other people to come in and provide input for us also before the final acceptance of it at the end of the month. In addition, we have taken our plan and we have submitted it to the county, and so the county has local experts, and what they do is they really comb through and look at the alignment of what we have written, what we have spent, how we're measuring it, and they provide us feedback, and we have to go back and reread that too. So this is an iterative process. We go through a lot of feedback, not only from the community, but also from the county, who really we lean on for all of this. So just a real quick reminder, our college and career readiness mission. Our goals are under all of these, engaging in a 21st century learning experience, communication systems, and engagement amongst all stakeholders, and continuing to provide a collaborative culture of learning for all staff. Just as a reminder again too, when we went through the LCAP, we have 8 basic priorities that we have to address, and if you look at the LCAP, these are all addressed, and you will see them. They are clearly put out. The one question that most people have is, what does basic mean? And what basic means is, do we have instructional materials? Do we have school facilities that are in good repair? And are we hiring credentialed teachers and have them appropriately signed? So when you talk about the basics of the priorities, that's what those are. The rest of them, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. Other pupil outcomes have to do with, are they engaged in VAPA courses, CTE courses, et cetera. So that's where that extends there. And our 5 LCAP goals that have been with us for a few years: high quality teachers, structures and systems for multiple pathways, was referred to earlier, safe, healthy, positive, attractive learning environment, parent and student engagement, and then a collaborative learning structure, not only for adults but for students too. So this is the frame under which we have built all of the actions and services moving forward. So at this time, I'm going to hand it off to the team, and Joy is actually going to start, and she's going to talk about the overall proposed budget. So Joy?
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Good evening, everyone. This is to briefly describe the combined general fund budget for LCAP year 2018-2019. $332 million of the combined general fund budget are for general operations and required programs. This amount includes all the salaries and benefits of our qualified classroom teachers, classified and certificated staff support, and administrators. Also included in this budget are funding for our core textbooks, instructional materials, and professional development. $23.9 million of our budget is to ensure a safe, clean, and orderly environment. The budget is to fund the district safety plan and assessments, routine maintenance and repairs of all our facilities, and the deferred maintenance. The rest of the budget is for all other operational expenses, like for utilities, insurance, capital lease payments. Total proposed budget for LCAP year 2018-2019 of almost $394 million. I just want to highlight that the first 2 items of almost $356 million will be directed toward LCAP, but not the entire budget is linked to the actions and services of the 5 LCAP goals. So now linking our budget to LCAP. So the district strives to implement its strategic vision toward improving student outcomes while at the same time maintaining fiscal responsibility. So $340 million, or 86% of the district's combined general fund budget, is for salaries and benefits of our qualified teachers and staff, who delivers services to our students. The district is facing increased costs related to pensions. 39.9 million of our budget goes to PERS and STIRS. And the underfunded special ed program contribution is 42.6 million in 2018-19 budget. Again, 356 million, which is the total of the two items in the last slides, will be directed towards meeting the LCAP goals, but not all are linked to the actions and services. Only 42.3 million is linked to the actions and services of the 5 LCAP goals. In the LCAP plan, it does not require that we include budget not directly impacting the LCAP goals. So this next slide is to show the funding sources of the 5 LCAP goals, color-coded. And 42 million or 42.3 million, you can go to the next slide, of the district's budget again will fund the actions and services of the 5 LCAP goals. Now I want to turn it over to Mercedes Hatchmith to go over the updates and proposed actions and services.
Thank you, Joy. We are pleased to be able to share with you a brief overview of our current 2017-18 work through our LCAP and the proposed 2018-19 actions and services with associated budgets. As we begin with Goal 1 of supporting our high-quality teachers as they implement standards-based curriculum, instruction, and assessment, please note, on the left-hand side of the slides, you will see this year's actions and services. Those action and services continue into 2018-19. On the right are the new proposed 2018-19 actions and services moving forward. So it's again, as it's a 3-year plan, will be the continuation as such. As you can see, we can continue to focus our alignment of academic and performance standards to the California state standards in those content areas. You will note the addition of world language as a targeted focus for the next 2 years. With the recent SERP, we will bring on new teachers to our district. To support our new hires with training and coaching, we will be increasing our Poway Professional Assistance Program, or PPAP team, meeting the goal of supporting our high-quality teachers throughout our district. We initiated the very important work with response to intervention and instruction TOSAs last year. As you know, intervention is ongoing, supporting the needs of our students both academically and socio-emotionally, as well as supporting the teachers and staff who work with our students. That work is very crucial. Our RTI coaches have met many times throughout the school year, building their efficacy as they receive training in effective strategies such as trauma-informed practices and Tier 2 behavioral interventions. The RTI TOSAs support students and families at their school sites as we continue to ensure that our students access those essential supports needed for wellness and for their success. Truly, this is culture-shifting work for our kids. Our exploration program has increased collaboration time for our teachers. Time is also spent discussing interventions and strategies for our students not at grade level while continuing the opportunity for enhanced instruction, focusing on coding, VAPA, science, and physical education. Thus, you will see an addition of 5 additional FTEs to the exploration program for 2018-19. This year, a task force was created to develop a visual and performing arts vision for our district, enhancing the opportunities for a relevant and holistic educational program in the arts for our children.
Good evening. I'm going to continue to elaborate on some of the metrics that support Goal 1. In support of this goal, it is important to review our California Accountability Dashboard results as previously shared at the December board meeting. Based on our 3rd to 8th grade students' overall performance on the Smarter Balanced Assessment, our students performed at the very high green level in ELA, with some of our student groups performing at lower levels as displayed on the slide. In math, our students' overall performance on the Smarter Balance Assessment was also deemed at the very high status level, but at the blue or the highest level on the dashboard, again with some of our student groups performing at the lower levels. For our 11th grade students, their performance on the Smarter Balance Assessment served as an indicator of readiness for college-level coursework in ELA and mathematics. This is termed the Early Assessment Program, or EAP, and for our PUSD juniors in 2017, 78% were deemed college-ready in ELA and 62 in mathematics. And for the first time, the state provided districts with a college and career indicator via a prescribed criteria that was presented at an earlier board meeting. For this year, the results were reported as status only on the 5x5 chart. As you know, status and change. We only had status, and PUSD students were performing at the very high level. Continuing on, the following data was also shared at an earlier board meeting as well. PUSD was reported to have a slight decrease in the number of students in both ELA and math performing at the met or exceed standards levels. We do continue to monitor our student group performance and align instructional approaches to meet the needs of all of our students.
For LCAP goal number 1, we built almost $15 million in the budget, coming from the base grant of LCAP, using supplemental money and our restricted lottery.
Okay, moving on to Goal 2. Goal 2 is really about closing those achievement and opportunity gaps for all of our students. Thus, you'll see the carryover again of the 17-18 actions and services and the new proposed actions and services on the right moving forward. In addition to continuing our pathways of academic support, we look to strengthen our services to students with special needs as we move towards a least restrictive environment district-wide. We will continue to increase and strengthen our career and technical education pathways for our children as they explore their passions, their variety of opportunities. This continued work includes closing the achievement gap through varied programs, such as site-led interventions, enhancing our nationally recognized programs, as well as continuing opportunities for STEAM. An exciting new system and structure for our community includes our partnership with the newly opened Palomar campus, Rancho Bernardo. Its access and presence will increase opportunities for both our students and their families. As we create those systems and structures to support our children at the elementary level, we will be implementing a district-wide intervention tool, SIPS, to accelerate their reading to bring students to grade level proficiency. At the secondary level, we will be again researching intervention tools that will support students in accelerating their learning in math and reading towards meeting proficiency. Another structure we will increase is student access to online instructional resources and the expansion of learning opportunities in a digital environment.
With these particular supports, we are pleased to report an overall increase in the number of students who have earned a C or better in an AP class, and in the number of students who have passed at least one AP test. Additionally, we are pleased to report some of our student group increases, as noted on the slide, were quite substantial. Likewise, we are pleased to report the increase in the number of students who have completed the A through G UC CSU course sequence, with some of our student groups making, again, wonderful gains. Our graduation rate continues to be quite high, with all of our student groups above 90%. Our English language learner progress on the California Accountability Dashboard was deemed to be very high at level 5 blue. This was an increase of 2 levels from the yellow medium level to the blue from 2016 to 2017. Of particular note, we are continuing to reclassify more of our English learners. However, we are now utilizing a new state-mandated assessment, the English Language Proficiency Assessment for California, or LCAP. Next year will be our baseline year in terms of using this assessment. PUSD continues to focus on providing our students with career technical education pathways, and overall our participation has remained steady, with some of our student groups, again, making significant gains.
For LCAP goal number 2, actions and services, our budget is $10.9 million. I just want to highlight here that for CTE program, we are only getting $116,000 from the county for almost $3 million estimated cost of CTE program. So the rest of the funding is coming from the base grant of LCFF.
Okay, goal 3. Goal 3 is about safety, the physical, the social, emotional, the facilities. As we review goal 3, you will note again the 2017-18 actions and services that will carry over and the proposed 18-19 actions and services moving forward. Currently, the physical facility assessments have already begun in order to identify areas of need for the safety and security of our schools and offices. We looked at the addition of 3 counselors at the middle school level and an increase of our psychologists. This increase also addresses enhanced training in suicide prevention and mental health. We will create a school safety committee that includes staff, first responders, parents, and students to develop a district safety plan and recommend prioritized actions. Already, a small group of first responders has met with district staff to begin these important conversations. As part of this work, we are recommending option-based training district-wide. In addition, as we continue to secure our safe campuses, we look to add a campus supervisor at each of our 6 middle school sites. Currently, this position is only found at our high schools. The success and engagement of each of our students is so important to us. Thus, we intend on developing and evaluating a plan and process for early identification of potential dropouts at our middle and high schools. Currently, our dropout rate is at 27 students district-wide.
The California Healthy Kids Survey is given to our students in grades 5, 7, 9, and 11 every 2 years. The data reported on this slide is from 2017. The survey will be administered again next year. Our goal is to increase the number of students who feel safe at school through the recommendations garnered from our various safety committees. Our suspension rate, as reported on the California dashboard, was deemed low at level 4 green. From the 2016 to 2017 dashboard, PUSD was reported to have more student groups needing improvement. This is work that we continue to employ in regard to our social, emotional, and restorative justice programs and supports. We have made a slight increase in the number of students who have passed 5 of the 6 physical fitness tests via our exploration teachers and enhanced emphasis on tracking our PE minutes at the elementary school. We have made PE a greater focus area.
A total of $11.2 million will support the actions and services in goal number 3. Included in the budget are funding from Special Reserve Fund and Cell Tower Fund of $2.2 million for the cost of upgrade and installation of security camera, fire alarm system, school fencing, and playground repairs. As mentioned, we added 6 campus supervisors and 3 counselors in goal number 3.
Goal 4. We have long enjoyed a strong partnership with our community in engaging and ensuring the success of our students. This is reflected in Goal 4. In addition to our 17-18 actions and services, we'll implement a Mandarin 50-50 dual immersion program for kindergarten students at Adobe Bluffs with support from the Confucius Institute. We will continue to implement and broaden the participation of students in the Korean language program at D39. This program is supported via a grant from the Foundation for Korean Language and Culture in the United States. This program is offered as an elective during the instructional day. Engaging our students in various programs while partnering with our parents is important to decreasing absence rates. Working with our parents, we can strategize ways to bring our students back into their education. We recognize that this may mean different pathways in order to engage our students. As we increase parent participation, we look to explore ways to assess parent engagement and involvement, a topic of conversation at our recent District and Parent Advisory Committee, DAC. We will continue to support business involvement and emerging relationships with Palomar College. One of the most exciting opportunities for our students is through Palomar Promise. This program ensures that the first year at Palomar College is free for all of our students. supporting their success as they begin their post-secondary journeys. Our work as a district is communicating this valuable information to our students and their families, raising awareness and encouraging participation for this amazing opportunity. Consistently, we strive to broaden and deepen the engagement of both our students and their parents.
Our California Healthy Kids Survey parent survey reported a high level of parent engagement in our schools. At all of our sites, staff continues to discuss strategies to enhance parent involvement in our schools. Our attendance rate has remained steady. Of course, it is our desire to increase this rate to the district goal of 97%. Sites continue to closely monitor attendance through a variety of means, and as you've heard, we continue to find other ways to engage our students so the desire to be at school is strong and steady. Although our dropout rate remains quite low, we are committed to curtail this rate by strategies utilized at our high schools.
For LCAP goal number 4, we are using mostly the base grant of LCFF, a total of $1.3 million. In this LCAP goal 4, we added the Mandarin program in the budget.
And our final goal. Collaborative, strong learning structures for both staff and students are the focus of Goal 5. We continue the expansion of blended learning opportunities for learners while including professional development and embedded coaching models for support. Professional learning and support via PPAP, T+, and our Teacher Flex Day not only provide options for our teachers, but honor professional choice in their learning. Our TLCs allow for increased alignment with district initiatives such as Benchmark, NGSS, and RTI. We look forward to continuing our partnership with the PFT and the PSEA as we support both the Teacher Learning Cooperative and the Classified Learning Cooperative in support of outstanding professional learning for our certificated and classified staff. Finally, our 2018-19 actions and services in Goal 5 continue the deep work that we embarked on in the 2017-18 school year.
Well, with that in mind, our TLC participation rate continues to grow each year. Teachers continue to engage in professional learning endeavors that will enhance their teaching focused on our district initiatives. We are excited that currently a quarter of all of our teachers have involved themselves in professional learning through the TLC process. Our new teacher professional learning and effectiveness system also has seen a large increase in participation from last year. Teachers and administrators are finding a high level of value in this new process as teachers report feeling that their instructional practices have been elevated via this new system. Overall, teachers have participated in a variety of learning opportunities beyond the TLC process. ELA, ELD site leaders have met and trained all of our K-2 teachers in utilizing our newly adopted ELA, ELD benchmark curriculum. We have also focused on early literacy training for all TK teachers in a phonemic awareness intervention program to accelerate learning and reading. 150 TK through 2 teachers participated in the Poway Unified Reading Academy that focuses on 5 key components of reading. All of our TK5 teachers have engaged in trainings that support the teaching of the California Next Generation Science Standards via the work of our professional learning leaders in science. All of our middle school science teachers received grade level specific PD to prepare them for teaching new units aligned to our transition to California NGSS. This professional development included shifts in instruction and assessment practices. High school science teachers collaborated around professional learning design to prepare them for teaching units that integrate Earth and space standards into their core curriculum. Additionally, they received professional development to assist them with shifts in instruction and assessment practices aligned to their new NGSS standards. In high school math, teachers received professional learning for teaching new integrated math curriculum. This professional development focused teachers on not only the new content, but also facilitating math discussions, managing productive struggle, and shifting assessment practices. High school world languages, all world language teachers received the first day of a 3-day professional development training series centered on the shifts in the communication modes of teaching world languages. Their first workshop focused on the interpersonal mode. Classified employees have increased their participation in professional learning opportunities as noted on the slides with their classified learning cooperatives. We are really, really thrilled about the mentor-mentee program that continues to thrive and to be well received by participants in sharing best practices.
The funding for Goal 5 actions and services is $3.9 million. Included in this funding is the $2.5 million coming from one-time discretionary money to fund the computer refresh program. And we also added 2 technology trainers in Goal 5.
Thank you to all of you. So this is a recap of all of the goals. And so hopefully what you have seen is where we've been. Just as a reminder, it is a 3-year goal. So we set forth and put down the goals we've been working on and really what we're going to be doing in addition to. So one more slide. So just to let you know the next steps, and then we're happy to open it up to questions. As I shared earlier, the DAC and DLAC has already reviewed and provided us feedback and questions. The LCAP is available for review and input, and it has been posted online, and it lets you know if you have some input to provide it to Alexis Knapek, so we can take that in. I'd also encourage anyone who wants to review the plan really to come in and look at it with us. There's a humanizing effect to 200 pages that we think is really important. You'll have questions, and we can help in between all the lines to help you understand that. June 28th, which is our last board meeting for this academic year, we're going to have the second read and hopefully the adoption of the LCAP. And by June 30th, the LCAP does go with the budget, and by June 30th, we hope to be able to submit our finalized plan to the county so that they can adopt it also. So that is the whole cycle, and I'm happy to open it up to any questions and see if the team can help provide clarity.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Board members, questions, comments?
You want to go first? Okay. I'll do one question, and I guess we can all take turns with questions. That seems to be fair. Under Goal 1, I have a very specific question. Early assessment program for English language arts and math, grade 11, Smarter Balanced. You have a percentage of students. What was the actual percentage of students taking the test this year? Did we have an increase or decrease in participation?
From last year, and I'd have to go back and research how many students actually participated in that, because the participation rates do vary, as you can imagine. So I can go back and look at that. And again, with the early assessment program, students can opt in or out of that, depending on their desire to get that credit without having to take those entry-level tests when they enter a community college or a CSU. So it is dependent on a number of different variables.
So I guess the intent of my question, what I would like to see is, what is the demographic of students that are opting out? Because that will skew your results that you're getting. If you're getting a certain population that's predominantly opting out, that may tend towards one end or the other of that scale. It's going to skew the data and make it look like our district is doing one thing or something else. So I would like to see that at some point.
Well, I think what we can do, Doug, is just add that as a data chart that
Absolutely.
we can add for everything, and we can have that annually reported.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ms. Beatty.
Actually, just to add to that, so you were referring to the grade 11 Smarter Balance. So, and I guess that was the reason that they added making it an early assessment to try to get the, because grade 11 is the hardest grade in the entire curriculum.
We are working really hard to encourage all students to take the test, because currently the state has set a 95% participation rate that they would like all schools and districts to ascertain. And so we are continuing to encourage, and they've done some really good work at the high schools to
In general or
encourage this.
grade 11, that 95, is that in general or grade 11?
All the way through, including grade 11.
Was there talk about doing away with the grade 11 standardized?
Not at this point. There isn't.
There's talk around a replacement potentially, but we're not there. And the thing about high schools, we only test at grade 11, so we have to hit that 95% point at that one grade level.
There is, to kind of piggyback on that, we know that on the dashboard, the academics of ELA and mathematics are only recorded from grades 3 to 8, and grade 11 is not reflected in the dashboard. The federal government has, in their review of the California dashboard, has now insisted that we find a way in the state of California to reflect grade 11, and they're working on that.
It's the worst grade
So
to test.
just so you know. Yes.
So much.
Yes.
Anyway, that wasn't my question. Did you want? Oh, let me just. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Dr. Robertson, for posting the LCAP. And I understand, that it's good to have community members to come in to get some context to the voluminous document. Speaking of voluminous, the first year of LCAP, it was 90 pages. I think that was 4 years ago. It was 90 pages, and we thought that was ridiculously long. So I'm not sure what happened and if there's any.
Well, the template changed, and it also asked us to respond differently into every individual thing that we wrote as part of our plan. We're not even that bad, I don't think.
No,
there
we're
are
not
some
that
out there
bad.
that are.
And the other part that we did too is we added the whole idea of the appendix before. And I think the initial draft of that, I don't believe we had an appendix attached. We always liked that transparency and clarity around our testing and the scores.
And I think originally, it looked like there were 14 because you had the 9 state priorities and then you had the 5. So here it was interesting to see we have the state priorities. I guess it's 8 now are now embedded within the 5. But I think one benefit, and I know some community members were referencing, I think they were referencing the Hanover report, which was the stakeholder input that then informed the LCAP. But the benefit of community members having direct access is, if they don't, it can be more convenient to them. And by way of an example, Ms. Latang just, sent to the board, I haven't looked at it, but some multiple spreadsheets where all the extensive data was broken down into different categories and then compared year over the year. So not only is it it's helpful for the community members to roll up their sleeves and dig into this. It helps us as board members do our job as well. I haven't taken a close look at that, but it is nice to compare year over year, because as we were going through this, I was thinking, well, okay, so we're talking about funding these programs, but how does it compare to last year, and what does it look like the next couple of years? So, for example, CTE, we've just ended our $4 million 3-year grant. So what funds have we allocated? Are we just first of all, we have to allocate funds just to backfill the loss of funding from those outside grants. And then in order to sustain the current program that we have, which is imperative, but then going forward, then there's the added step of perhaps expanding the program. And so it's not clear from this presentation if we've allocated the funding to do both of those things.
I think what our next presentation, which is our budget presentation, so we've had to go to general fund in order to fund that. And if you want to know what kinds of growth we're looking at, we're happy to share that. Kathleen has really more the detail stuff on that. This isn't the place where we add all those things. And that's why when you come in, we can talk about those things and share any specifics that people might have, or direct them to the person directly involved with that, so you can kind of see what's coming up moving forward.
But didn't that, and I understand that it's maybe more the purview of the budget, but and I thought it was 236 pages. Didn't that LCAP, 236-page LCAP, delineate those numbers or not, as far as allocating to say, CTE or world language?
Well, what Joy just shared with you, remember, this is only part of the budget. We have other parts of the budget that also impact these particular goals. Some things are multi-funded. They're not necessarily just right here. So that's probably the piece that Ron will be able to clarify in terms of the broader budget around those programs.
I think pages 208 to 212 will give you that information. It will list all the programs and the funding for 17-18, 18-19, and 19-20 of the LCAP report.
Rest assured, next year will be 500 pages, right? It's tied to the growth of the tax code. It's got to go more every year.
Continuous improvement, right?
Mr. Conor Ratcliffe.
On goal 1 also, I note that we're increasing our exploration team by 5 FTEs. Hooray. My question here, I have a little bit of a concern that this is deepening curricular focus on PE, VAPA, coding, and science. Yes, but I have a concern that this isn't meeting exactly what the board talked about, the direction for exploration. And I have not had a chance to dig into our community input in this area, but I don't think that's what the board said. Yes, we are super happy about the 5 FTEs added in there, but the curricular focus, I'm not sure is what the board talked about at our budget workshop. Our consensus focused definitely on PE and VAPA. Coding and science, I think we discussed possibly taking a back seat, but really working to make our exploration program something that would be more specific, site-specific, what they need on their sites, recognizing that some sites actually have a science teacher who comes in every week, sometimes practically a full-time teacher on their campuses. Some have a full-time PE teacher. We'd love, I think that's what the board said at our board workshop, that we would like to see our exploration program be a little bit more personalized and specialized on campuses so that the ones who have a full-time PE teacher don't have our exploration teachers spending time in PE. If they're meeting their numbers that they're required to do, why are we having them do PE some more? We already, have a foundation or something that pays for that. We want more art, say. We talked about wanting that, and I'm not sure that's reflected here. Expanding, great, let's do it, but let's make sure we get the focus right for each site, and I think that's what the board wanted, but if you have some community input that reflected something else, I think I'd be interested in hearing what that was, because I didn't catch that.
So if I can respond to that. So it's good to have clarity around what the board had shared. The notion that we have a personalized program to every school, depending on what their funding can bring in, would be very, very difficult for us because we have a single teacher that can serve 5 schools. So if all those 5 schools have different funding structures, then we're having to create different kinds of curriculum for all of those schools. And I mean, it's a huge rotation and master schedule that we actually have for all of these teachers. That would be really challenging for us, and it's not something we could turn over in a year. And we did provide the board the information around what our schools are providing. If the goal is to really, and the board gives us this direction, to go with PE and VAPA, then maybe what we can do is talk to our schools around redirecting those monies somewhere else so that we can provide a coherent, common curriculum for any second grader, third grader, fourth grader, all the way through. And then, we can benefit both. I mean, our goal really is we have to hit our standards. We have to hit our PE minutes, as you know. But at the end of the day, we want every second grader to have a common experience in this, no matter where they go to school. It shouldn't be different based on a foundation, a grant, or whatever. So if the board wants to give us direction that way, we can do that, and we can set our teams off this summer to really deepen the PE and the VAPA, and that will be the experience, and our students will have K-5.
I'm not going to pretend I'm speaking for the whole board here, but we did have this discussion, a fairly lengthy discussion at the budget workshop. So,
No, we did have the discussion. I actually just looked at my notes. I happened to bring my budget workshop binder with me. But there was a lack of closure in terms of how we intended to, or how it was going to be implemented. The idea that would be more focused around arts and PE. We expressed that as a desire, but there was no closure in terms of how that might happen.
I think with 5 more FTEs, we're getting a little more continuity of lessons, a little more frequency that makes it more valuable perhaps, but it's still not enough. I mean, it's certainly not getting us our mandatory PE minutes when they, they're not coming frequently enough for that. But I would like to see us working on this and really honing what we're doing with our exploration program, because I think there's a lot of potential. But I think, yes, there is that the whole idea is to provide that baseline so everyone's receiving at least a minimum amount of each of these things. But again, we don't. I feel like it gets out of sync with the schools that are already providing it. The lesson that comes in once every 2 weeks is out of sync with what they're already doing in their every other day, or I'd just like to see this honed, and I'd like to see this work done, because I don't think it's working ideally yet. And again, it's not a full-time program for each school, so it's going to be hard to make it ideal, but I'd like to see this moving to be a little more personalized. Go ahead.
I want to second Michelle's comments regarding the sort of the origin here. I remember the first meeting in closed session when we talked about exploration and funding it. And
in closed session? Then zip it.
No, I think. Well,
I just remember the conversation, and there was a clear direction at the time. It didn't include STEM or coding. Coding hadn't even been mentioned, and STEM we do very well in this district. And I think that including that in is just sort of a human tendency to stay in your wheelhouse. And I think the purpose of the program was to shore up some of the things that we weren't doing well, that we weren't succeeding at. And that includes VAPA and PE. We were at the time being sued for our lack of PE minutes and in compliance with the law. So I think that's the first thing, is that's definitely how I remember it, is the same way that Michelle does. The second is that, this concept of providing a uniform experience to our children, Dr. Robertson sort of raised the issue of why that's so hard to do, and why we, in some cases, maybe can't do it, because Michelle wants to go in and supplement what each school isn't doing. Makes perfect sense. And Dr. Robertson says, well, we can't do that. That would be too individualized. Maybe we could have the foundations redirect the money that they're already spending. Well, when we have them redirect the money they're already spending, we've now, again, created an unbalanced education for our children. And I think that that's something that has to be addressed by this board on sort of a larger scale. But, the whole purpose of my comment was to say that I recollect the direction of the program the same way that Michelle does.
And it could have been very well that you were recollecting the board budget workshop, which we held in the round room, so it was actually open session, so you're all right. You're good.
So just to add on to that, since we're on that, I think the VAPA vision plan may also need to make, we need to make sure. I was at that VAPA community meeting that we had when we were looking for community input, and it sounded like that was going to be a standalone initiative. So we might need to look at consolidating some of those efforts as well, if that isn't already in the plan, which I'm sure it is.
Ms. Beatty?
Right, so I'll add to the conversation about the exploration and provide a bit of the historical context that Mr. Sellers was alluding to. So this originally was, the inception for this was because of community parent input. the Hanover report from 2017 actually had a 6.0 that the 2018 didn't, and that was an open-ended question an open-ended responses. What other input, ideas, or recommendations do you have to continue to improve Poway Unified School District? And I did have a question as an aside as to why that question wasn't asked this time around. But among the top 4 were, and this was back, this time a year ago, art and music and class sizes. So the inception of the exploration was based on parent feedback that they wanted to bring back art and music, which had been cut during the Great Recession. These programs had gone by the wayside, and the community wanted these to be prioritized, and as well, Mr. Sellers alluded to this lawsuit because we weren't meeting the requisite number of PE minutes in elementary school, and thus the exploration was kind of a trial balloon, was born to see if this program would fit the bill. So I think what we're all getting at, and I think what the conversation was at the board workshop was, maybe we need to reevaluate this program. Is this the right one? Do we want to invest more in it? Do we want to redirect the funds and do something else with that money? And so I think based on all of this input, that maybe at this point we want to just press the pause button and reevaluate how we want to provide those programs. And it does seem like there's been this creep of these additional functions for exploration. We've added the STEM. We added the coding. The board was just told a week ago that we're adding World of Work, reassess career personality framework, possibly adding second language opportunities, engineering, science, technology, math, coding. So this is getting a bit far afield from what its original conception was. So I think we need to have further conversations about this.
I would add that I am absolutely not ready to press pause. I think this can be an evolving program, and I think it can continue as it is. We are expanding it, and we said we wanted to. And I'm in favor of that. I do think that it does need to evolve, and I think that's common across all of us, certainly, that it needs to evolve. But I think it can do that as we move forward.
I guess the problem with that is, as you had mentioned, the interface with the currently existing programs, either the classroom teacher instruction or the parent foundation and PE and PTA, the arts attack, the art and music programs that the parent groups are already doing. It doesn't fit seamlessly with those, and so that has to be reconciled, before we throw more money into this program.
I agree that it needs to be reconciled. I don't think we're throwing money at it, though. I think we have a good, solid program, and we're providing a good, solid program to the kids, and on a lot of different levels. And I agree that we probably need to come back to something that's a little bit more focused. But I think we can do that without pressing pause and losing all the good things that we're doing now. So I would not be in favor of doing that, but I know that we all agree, at least, that we need to hone this program a bit. A lot, perhaps.
Yeah, just to kind of wrap it up, I think that there's probably general agreement here that there's desire on behalf of the entire board to return the focus of the program to its original intent. I do agree also that perhaps pausing it would be a bit too disruptive because it is providing valuable services presently. But that isn't to say that between now and August there can't be aggressive work done at improving it closer to its original intent.
Maybe I used the wrong term. Pausing. We're about to expand the program. How many TOSAs do we have now? We're adding 5 more TOSAs. Is that a doubling in the program? I don't know how many TOSAs we currently have.
It'll bring it to 25.
25. Okay, so 20% increase. So is that worth considering, whether or not we want to expand the program at this point?
Well, I think if the positions or the plans to bring 5 new on stay in place and we use this time to refocus it, well, then those 5 new additional members will be doing the work in a redirected fashion.
Yeah. And it increases the frequency that our students see these teachers, these exploration teachers, and that can only help. We can provide better services for our kids the more frequently that they see the teachers, and 5 more helps. I mean, every additional FTE in this program helps, and yes, the program can be improved, but
Dr.
yeah,
Phillips.
let's go.
So we hear what the board has said, and even in the board workshop, but at this point of time in this year, it's impossible to completely change it, but we can start working towards that goal. And so as we, because the hiring and everything with the last week of school being, in a week and a half, people go off for summer, people have already started lesson planning for the opening of next year. And so as we go into the summer, we'll start doing as much as we can to align our program. We've already started the process of hiring the new TOSAs already. And we'll look and we'll evaluate how the program is organized, and we'll start moving and shifting towards a personalized program and offering, hopefully, as we talked about in the board workshop, opportunities like world language or language courses or things like that maybe are more differentiated to the needs of that school. So we'll start shifting that way, but we can't do that right now to start the school year off that way. But we'll start moving in that direction over the year.
Thank you. Any further comments on this item? Ms. Beatty.
Change the subject. So on number 2, there was mention of access to online instructional resources, expand digital learning environments. Is that including online classes, or is that purely instructional materials?
I believe I'll start, and then we'll have Jennifer respond to some of that. So one of the things that we are looking to is really shifting to more online resources for our core materials. It is a shift, and moving all of our staff there will take some time, but Beth and Doug have been leading this work around science, because we believe science is probably an easier place with how science evolves all the time, and creating units and using free online resources to do that. The cost around culminating online resources is making sure that our teachers can come together and create these units together that we use district-wide. So it's a little bit of a shift. Sometimes if you have subscriptions to certain things that create some of the curriculum, that will be the shift. But we know that being able to do this and being able to post all these things is really important. And then I'll turn it over to Jennifer to talk around some of these other supports and shifting classrooms in this digital environment.
Thank you. I think the other piece that we're looking at to answer your question is that we're working with some of our virtual courses with CTE to be able to provide some of those pathways and opportunities in an online digital environment. So we're also looking at that piece as well.
It's kind of reckless.
To move to one slide ahead of that, still on that second goal, I note that developing and implementing priority actions by the Special Education Advisory Committee is moved into next year after financial implications are assessed. This concerns me a little bit. I thought we were moving. I thought we were going to see it at the end of this month. I just hoping that we were going to get that and begin moving, because there were a lot of things in that plan that required some training pieces and some real outreach and changing hearts and minds piece that needs to happen, or we're not going to make the changes in 1920 either, and that's too slow. So I'd like a little clarification on when are we going to see a plan?
Yeah, so you're going to see something before the last board meeting, because we're continuously working on that. But we have already met with all the high school department chairs and principals, and we are already looking at an SAI model, the specialized academic instruction, and really how we're going to move that in our high schools. So that work has already happened. We've kind of looked at everybody's program. So the question is, where is it that we're common? Where are we tight around the program? And then when do we allow the cultures of the schools to be able to provide those services to the students that are there? So there is work that has been going on. We have a communication that we're writing with PSCA and PFT. That's going to come out to everybody, but we do have a plan that we are working on. That will come out before the next board meeting.
Okay, because I'm anxious to see it come to everyone, since I've been at all the meetings, but not everyone has. And I think it's important that it get out there as soon as it is presentable, because we need to move.
Yeah, and I will tell you that the SEEK did come out with what I would say is a pretty aggressive plan, and I think we just need to be able to.
I would characterize it as not aggressive.
Well,
so that's
okay,
interesting.
you can, but we are going to have to be able to push and pull, because the hearts and minds, the staffing that it's going to take, the shifts with both general ed and special ed, it's
And
big
families.
and very important. So thank you, Michelle.
Additional board member comments.
I just wanted to circle back to the question that I had asked in the Hanover report, why the open-ended question wasn't asked this time round. What other input, ideas, or recommendations do you have to continue to improve Poway Unified?
If it was, I think, in
It
the
was a
online survey, I think that was something that was generated, I think, Christine, when the survey went out. I'm not sure if it was something that it was too much for the Hanover to call at the time.
Oh, so we did ask the question?
I don't believe we asked it this year. Okay.
We'll have to double check. We typically do. We might not have asked it through Hanover, but we also had the online piece, but I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at that, Miss Beatty.
And is it possible for the board to see that metadata, so to speak,
All the raw data?
how much input, like where it came from, how many from school sites? Because there were some issues this year with the attendance at the sites, and then, so the numbers that we have here in this report, it'd be nice to know where that information came from. Was it mostly from, the online surveys? I guess we didn't have a district. We had different types of community forums, and then we mostly had the school site forums as well.
So if I remember correctly, that data is the online data, and what we did is we culled all the site data. So we had Google Docs, and so what we did is we had everybody upload all of their data that they got from their site forums, and all the ones that came in electronically, and we just pushed it all up to Hanover to analyze for us, is what we did. And what you can't do, I think, on the one that Christine had pushed out is we didn't ask for specific schools. It was the one question Mrs. Latang was asking. And so we're going to have to figure out how we do that next time for both the online. But definitely the site data, they put it into their own Google Docs, so the principals will have that data and should know what their community was sharing.
Yeah, because I had heard that from other parents as well, that there wasn't an opportunity to indicate which school, they were talking about for site-specific feedback. But you're saying the principals did get that information.
If they were at the site forums, then the principals have all of that data. But if
the online ones,
if you went online, so we're going to have to shift the online one so that people can identify schools and then provide that data. So if you have a parent that has a school at elementary, middle, and high, I guess you pick one and go in 3 times and answer depending on your experience there. So that'll be fun for those of you that have one at every level. So thank you for that input in advance.
Ms. O'Connor.
This is my last one. It's on goal number 3. In our additional actions and services, increase the number of counselors and psychologists serving students. I definitely saw the increase in counselors for middle school. I didn't see any increase in psychologists. Just wondering if I missed it.
You didn't miss it specifically. Ron's telling me it's not budgeted. One of the things we have to look at, though, also is the number of students we're serving. There's a ratio of psychologists to students that we have, And so we just haven't culminated that information. And so in the near future.
So
if
there could be an additional hire.
Well, there could be a recommendation to do that, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? All right.
Thank you,
Thank
team.
you all very much.
Very, very much.
That brings us to agenda item 5.1, another public hearing. This time, a public hearing of the 2018-2019 proposed budget. First reading, Associate Superintendent Little. But you want to present? I'm going to open it up. We'll open the hearing up at 7:23. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak to this item? Going once, going twice. Do you have any cards for this? Sorry. Just a moment. There we go. Mr. Sellers.
We have one speaker on this topic, Melissa Lazaro.
Welcome back.
It's always great to be back. Just a quick comment, just based on the discussion that was happening. I think it's really interesting to note that from a parent perspective that's involved in both PTA and foundation, when the idea of exploration or the exploration program was pitched to us as parents, it was that the kids would be learning things that they wouldn't typically learn in the classroom. So they would be learning things like engineering and science and things that aren't tied directly to the curriculum. So I was a little bit taken back tonight when I heard that those funds and those allocations of those teaching resources were being given towards PE. And I think that maybe that there was some customization provided at our school site. But to me, the exploration program should be geared towards our goals of college and career focus. Instead of PE, perhaps we have a health focus. Because at the school sites, if we're providing PE already, if the teachers are required to make sure that we ensure those minutes, so then, it's something based on nutrition. It's tied to the garden. It's tied to agricultural science or digital dissecting if we're not going to use actual animals and we can use the technology. But that would just be my input in regards to that. I think the other thing we need to consider is the value of these services. How are we tracking this? Where are we receiving that input? In my world, as a former executive recruiter, I would never hire someone without having a job description. And so I would challenge you as a board to make sure that this curriculum is completely ironed out and is specific before we go and hire an additional 5 individuals. I'm not against hiring 5 individuals, but to everyone on the board's point, we need to understand what the value is of this program and what are the learning outcomes that we're trying to get out of it while maintaining that consistency. 2 other points that I'd like to make. I think in terms of goal number 4, we can look to the incredible program of junior achievement that was rolled out at some school sites this year, at least at the primary school level. I had the opportunity to be that teacher, was totally blown away by, one, how easy it was to roll it out, very little preparation on the parents' part, and yet the incredible, innovative, and creative minds that were coming out of our discussion centering around global citizenship and entrepreneurship and all of that. I should probably patent some of their ideas and make some money off it. In terms of goal number 5, how are we tracking the ROI of the training that's being provided? Is the training being mandated? Are we tracking the progress in relation to the kids of the benefit of this training? And finally, using SIPs as an intervention. Back in my wheelhouse of reading, SIPs would not be inappropriate for the majority of struggling readers who need a structured literacy approach, which involves that multisensory component. I've heard they're going to be rolling that out soon, but we want to make sure that we're using structured literacy for our students and not balanced literacy, especially those that are struggling. And finally, making sure that teachers are trained and that it's mandated on these specific programs to ensure the fidelity of how they were taught. We can buy all the curriculum in the world, but if we're not training teachers, if we're not ensuring and tracking fidelity to these programs, we're not going to get the results that we want and that we can expect for our students.
That was our last speaker on this topic.
Thank you very much. Associate Superintendent Little.
Yes, thank you, President Zane. Good evening, board members, members of the public, colleagues. This evening, we provide a first reading of the district's budget for 2018-19.
Just excuse me for a moment. I'm actually going to call a close to the public hearing at this moment at 7:28. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This is our first reading for the 2018-19 budget for the board's consideration and feedback. So we have a brief presentation to complement the 11-page budget document that the board has received. It's been revised. I think there are some copies for the public as well, slight revisions. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Director Ramiro and Assistant Director Tarantino and their teams for their diligence and dedication to the efforts on the budget. Here's our agenda for this evening. Briefly, we are just focusing on the district's general fund and the framework and the assumption used in its development. So as we know, the 2018-19 proposed general fund budget is predicated on the governor's May revised budget, which of course in turn is predicated on a robust state economy. So we have the 2.71% funded COLA, as well as an additional 0.29% that the governor included in the May revised to the base, which is about a 3% increase to the LCFF base, resulting in about $18.3 million more of ongoing money next year for the district. We have a fully funded LCFF funding gap. That's worth about $2.2 million in additional supplemental funding. We have significant one-time discretionary funds worth approximately $12 million to the district next year and of one-time nature. Of course, our budget is developed with in compliance with the criteria and standards by the CDE, as well as aligned, as we'll see, which was pointed out in the last presentation, and we'll see even more closely as we go through this presentation with our district's LCAP goals and objectives. Our multi-year projections are based in part on School Services of California fiscal assumptions, particularly the revenues. Other major fiscal assumptions I just want to point out here so I can do a briefer presentation on June 28th. We have some refined ADA projections. So we've revised our ADA projections down slightly. As Trustee Beatty, or I believe one of the trustees noted earlier, we had a 97% target that we were hoping to achieve next year, and we built the budget on that rate. We're sort of backpedaling a little bit given our current numbers, and we're going to sort of keep the 97% target, but get there sort of in a gradated fashion in 3 years' time. So next year's numbers will be 96.8%, the following year 96.9%, and we still have the 97% attendance rate target for 2020-2021. So we'll get there. It's just going to take probably a little bit longer than we had hoped. One of the DBAC recommendations, you'll recall, was to enhance our facilities use program and look at the fee schedule. We've done that. That's worth an additional $400,000 of revenue in the new budget. We're increasing the Fund 17 support for technology, and I'm happy to talk about any of these more at length if you want at some point. Step and column costs are always built into our budget. Increasing PERS and STIRS employer costs, we'll see a year-over-year increase of $7 million in STIRS and PERS employer contribution next year compared to this year. So obviously that's taking a lot of that new money that we're receiving next year. Increasing medical insurance costs are budgeted at a 5% increase. We have included some CERP savings, which include the 40 attrited retirees that were not included in Keenan's numbers. So our savings are a little bit higher than you saw in Keenan's presentation and data. So most of this has been talked about. I'm not going to go through all of these line by line, but again, happy to answer any question. This is what's new and additional with the feedback from the board budget workshop, from the LCAP community survey, from our site leaders, from our departmental heads, as well as from cabinet and the superintendent, of course. Here we provide a list of what's new to our 2018-2019 budget. It's not exhaustive. It could change given feedback from tonight and some of the things that Dr. Robertson and Dr. Phelps talked about. But this is what's new. We didn't include, just in case you're wondering why, the Mandarin program expansion, because it was actually in the budget, it was just in the reserves. So now it comes up to the expense line. Same with the 2 technology trainers. Those were actually set aside in the reserves, and now they just come up to the expense line. So other than that, I think we hit most of what's new. And these additions total nearly $14 million in next year's budget. And again, happy to address any of those. This is just delineating the numerous funding sources related to the district's general fund. This slide delineates how those general fund resources are being utilized in next year's budget. As Director Ramiro noted earlier, salaries and benefits constitute approximately 86% of total general fund expenditures, and this represents a reasonable level in California K-12 districts, as you're aware. So here's a slide. The purpose of this slide really is just to look at the year-over-year increase in the revenues. So we depict here the revenue sources again, same numbers that you saw on the pie chart, only now we're looking at how they stack up against last year's numbers. The local control funding formula is up 7.5%. Our federal revenues are down 9%, and that's a result of deferred revenues that were recognized in the current year, but will not be recognized next year until next year if they're not spent. Of course, other state revenues reflects the big influx of the $12 million of one-time money. That's why that's up 10%. Local revenues down slightly, primarily due to carryover and site contributions that are not yet budgeted for next year and complete. And then transfers in and other sources about the same. Overall, we're looking at a 6.7% growth in revenues compared to last year. However, if we factor out the $12 million of one-time money, that number is closer to 3.5%. And so that's 3.5% ongoing increase year over year. On the expenditure side, we're looking again at a year-over-year comparison. So nothing really jumps out here until we get down to really employee benefits. That, of course, is PERS and STIRS, and the health medical insurance premiums that we talked about increases. Books and supplies down 42.6%. That's because we have not included any carryover in this budget yet. So we're still closing the books for this current year, and we'll add the carryover that's left over at the sites into our first interim budget next year. So that's the difference there. Similarly with capital outlay, looks like it's down 64% or so. This year we spent $1.7 million of Prop 30 money that showed up on the restricted side for capital projects. That won't be there until next year, depending on what we get next year. We had a backlog of those Prop 30 projects that we finally got off the plate and got finished. So overall, total expenditures are increasing about 2.4% compared to last year. What does that mean to the bottom line? At this time, we're projecting for 2018-2019 a net surplus of a little over $1 million. So with respect to the impact on the fund balance, we're projecting to begin the fiscal year with a beginning balance of about $51 million. Our net surplus of about $1 million will take us to a projected ending balance of about $52 million, or a projected reserve level of 12.7%. And I thought there should be some comparison points just to help put that in perspective. The total reserve levels in the governor's proposed budget for 2018-2019 is 12.4%. So we're doing better than this state next year, which is always a good sign. And as you know, according to School Services of California, the 2016-2017 average reserves for California Unified School Districts was 16.6%. That was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Poway was also at 16.6%. So districts are moving in the general direction of having less reserves for obvious reasons, right? And we can talk about those further if you'd like to. Here's a breakdown of the components of the ending fund balance. I won't spend a lot of time on those. These may change as we close the books with respect to the carryover numbers by June 28th. We thought it was important just to share the projected contribution from the general fund unrestricted to certain restricted programs and its change year over year. So for special education, in the current year, we've contributed $39 million to the special ed program from our general fund unrestricted side. Next year, that will jump to $42.6 million. Routine maintenance, $10.2 million in the current year, will jump about 5.5% to $10.7 next year. The TPP program remains flat, so overall contributions will increase about 8.5%. To Dr. Robertson's earlier point and to the board's question, I think it was Michelle's, with respect to CTE, as you know, we've been contributing to that program more over the past few years than in the past. So if we were just to go back a few years' time, the CTE grant was worth about $2.8 million. That went away, so the county is keeping most of that money. Last year they gave us $100,000, or this year they gave us $100,000, so we're contributing $2.7 million to make up the difference in the current year. Next year, that contribution will increase to $3 million. I think it was Trustee Beatty's question. So the commitments there from the general fund side is just, again, a contribution that's coming from the unrestricted side to the restricted side of the house as the other funds have dwindled. We're hopeful that the state will re-up the CTE grant funds, and we're hopeful that the county will pass more of those along through to districts. That remains to be seen. Okay, turning our attention to our multi-year projections. Briefly, we have the 2018-19 numbers that we've just looked at. And as we shared at the board budget workshop last month, you'll note that we're projecting deficits in our out years. We should note that these deficits do include some of the DMAC recommendations, right? So we mentioned the facilities use program enhancements. It includes some additional revenues generated from the transportation department, which is a recommendation from the DBAC. Of course, DBAC had recommended the SERP, which is included in these numbers. And we're also working at centralizing custodial and pool chemical purchases, which will also decrease the expenditures, and those are included in these numbers. There are still quite a few DBAC recommendations that we continue to look at with respect to 2019-2020 and the out years, and I can talk about those if you're interested, but those would be some of the mitigation efforts that we work towards as we think about how to mitigate those deficits in those out 2 years. And we'll look at, let me just skip ahead. There are some other, as you know, efforts in Sacramento that might also enhance the district's fiscal position in those out years, right? So we have the Meritsuchi legislation or recommendation AB 2808, which is actually increasing the LCFF base to a level that exceeds the national average. Wouldn't that be nice? So a little over $11,000 of funding per pupil. And as you know, right now we're about 8,800, 9,000, Joy, somewhere there next year. So that would be a significant increase. Of course, it'd be phased in, I'm sure, over time. Similarly, AB 3136 would revise special education funding, again, trying to make it more equitable, looking at those districts that have a lot of high needs, high costs, special needs students, and make sure that they're getting what they need with respect to additional funding, et cetera, et cetera. And we still have to see how the state is going to allocate the strong workforce dollars, that $200 million that has been earmarked and allocated for the K-12 component of a CCC program. That remains to be seen. And so hopefully we'll get a share of that. So those will also augment the 2019-2020 budgets, and we'll know more about those within 6 months' time probably. So if we did nothing, which is of course not likely, but if we did nothing, these would be the impacts of those deficits on our ending fund balance. And you can see how the reserve levels fall as a result of those deficits. And of course, we're not going to let that happen. 10% is probably the minimum reserve level that we want to maintain at any point. So we would have 1 year's of time to work, if we had to, to work at sort of mitigating that $8 million structural deficit moving forward. I think that's all I had, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
Mr. Conner-Radcliffe.
On one of your first slides, you had other major fiscal assumptions. Something you didn't hit there that I noticed on your year-over-year, our unduplicated count is increasing over time. How do you come up with that?
With the
percentages that you're projecting going forward, because it's going up and up.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to defer that to Director Ramiro. Do you know? I think that the state provides that to us, right? There we go. It's from the LCFF calculator.
So
I think sorry. I think the question is, how do we know that our numbers are rising?
Yeah,
correct? The
how do we know that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I see that it goes up a full percentage, a little more than 1% over the 3 years, though. So I'm just wondering, where do we get that? It's over 24% by that third year.
Do you want to come to the mic, Director Ramiro, please?
I mean, I'm just curious. This is kind of, because it does impact how much money we're getting in supplemental.
I know as we submit state reports, we get the data back from the state, and they adjust from the finance side, they adjust the UPP numbers, and then we look at the state reports and say, oh, our number went from 22.6 to 23%. And then from the finance side, we use that state number to readjust the budget.
So extrapolating out, we're just assuming it's going to continue to rise as a percentage of our student population. We don't have, just because it did this year, we're going to assume it continues to do that?
So our unduplicated students are specific, kids who are classified. So we have our English learners, our students who are in foster care, our homeless students.
I know who's included. I'm just wondering, how do we know?
So how do we know? So typically there's a couple of different ways. One is, for example, on our low income, that is self-reported through free and reduced lunch. And there's also a calculation that it happens between when our system, our student information system, speaks to CalPads, all that stuff talks to each other. And so when we do that, those are the numbers that we end up receiving as far as some sort of confirmation that we know who those kids are. But a lot of that information, for English learners, obviously, it's when they come in and we test them and we're able to ascertain via the CELT, now LPAC. So as far as being able to predict what all these numbers will be year to year, I don't know that there's always a formula unless Joy knows of one.
Okay, that's kind of what I was getting at. Is there anything that we're really basing on this on, or is this just kind of year over year where we're assuming it's going to be a similar jump to past years? I mean, because at that rate, eventually we'd be, at 100% if we keep going out, and that's not happening. So I'm just wondering. Okay. All right. That's good enough for me. Thank you.
Other board members?
Thank you, Mr. Little. I wanted to just get some clarity on the numbers. On the first page, the step on page 2 said the PERS and STIRS increases for next year is an additional $7 million. That's correct?
Yes.
And the medical insurance you said was $5 million?
I said 5%, so I think that's about 1.8 million. On the unrestricted, another $500,000 on the restricted, so 2.3 million.
2.3, actually, yeah, 2.3. And then the step and column, what is that, about 3.4 million?
Yep, 3.3, 3.4, right in there.
Okay, and that's is that before the raises are factored in?
No, that's with the raises factored in. So all of these numbers include the salary increase and the implications of those salary increases.
So it's just under 13 million. So those are the, okay, the additional expenses, so the total expenses for 17-18 are $383 million. But for 18-19, they're $392. So I'm trying to reconcile that. That's $9 million, an additional $9 million.
Correct.
So, but there's these additional costs of $13 million for the staff raises and compensation.
So remember that the 2017-18 expenditures include quite a bit of carryover that's being expended, as well as the Prop $30 that we just talked about. A lot of one-time expenditures that are being pulled out.
Those I say.
Right. Plus, remember the 2017-18 numbers also include the PFT's one-time increase, right, the bonus. It's backed out from the following year. So there's quite a bit of one-time money in 17-18 that's not in 18-19.
Okay.
Additional board members?
Oh, just I'll follow. And then, did you say that the new and additional items on page 3? Did you say that total $14 million?
Yes, I said nearly 14 million.
Okay.
Somewhere between 13.5 to 14 million.
And then my only comment on those is that it doesn't go far enough. We're not adding any counselors at the high school level, even though we still have very high ratios of 500 students per counselor. We're adding 3 at the middle school level where the ratio is 700 students per counselor. But it's 3 for 7 middle schools. So my comment is that's not enough, and I will continue to also advocate for continued efforts to bring down class sizes. Not only has it been a continuing theme in our LCAPs. I mentioned it in the Hanover report as one of the top 4. But it's just not right to have class sizes of 40 for math or science at the middle or high school level, or English or foreign languages, or social studies, whether they're the regular classes or AP classes. So I think while we're seeing this additional revenue that has been front loaded because the state saw additional funds to their coffers, and we got our LCFF funding paid 2 years early. We need to make sure that we're still prioritizing these student programs as well. That's less of a budgetary comment and more of a program comment. So policy comment. Thank you.
Mr. Sellers.
Sort of following on the heels of that, I will make a budgetary comment as opposed to a program comment, which is that the references that Mr. Little makes to the structural deficit aren't really quite accurate. The structural deficit is actually just the revenues over the expenditures. The other financing sources are really just fund transfers that are balance sheet transactions. It's just money coming from some other places. It's not actual revenue. And that being said, we cut our structural deficit from this year at 17 million. Next year we cut it down to 1 million. Very impressive. We even managed to drive our fund balance up, which does include those transfers I made mention of, up another $1 million from 51 to 52 million. But as pointed out, after that it gets pretty bleak. Our structural deficit balloons again to 11 million, and it's another 11 million in the next year, 2021, and our fund balance continues to drop from 52 to 43 to 35. And that's why when I voted against the PFT contract last month, I wish we had taken some of that $8 million that we're spending on increased staff salaries and hung on to it. And it would have helped us prepare for the possibility that the additional revenues we hope come from the state in subsequent years, what if they don't? We're looking at $8 million deficits. We're assuming that the state will help us out on that. We don't have to make $8 million in cuts. But, we had $8 million to play with. And if we doled out a little bit less of it in staff remuneration, we would have been able to hang on to some of that and use it as insurance against revenue losses or expenditure increases in future years. And the worst case scenario would have been they don't come to pass. The state money comes in and we have the additional monies to either increase our fund balance or pay raises. And that's my whole rationale, is that we're hoping or assuming that these revenues come from the state, and we don't really know that they will. So I don't think it's prudent the way that we've gone about distributing our staff raises, and I think that the budget in future years reflects the fact that we're sort of covering next year with one-time funds.
Could I just respond to one point with respect to the inter-fund transfers? The inter-fund transfers, for the most part, reflect income coming in for expenditures that are related to those transfers in. So, for example, next year or this year, we're spending $400 and some odd thousand on the guidepost work, right, that they're doing for the security assessments at the sites. So that is recognized as an expense in the expense column, but it's being funded from Fund 17 or Fund 40, and that's transferred in. So my point is, if we were to back out the revenue, we'd have to also back out the expense. So the $8 million structural deficit is actually with or without the transfers in or out, because most of the time the transfers net out to zero. But your point's taken, the other points as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Other board members? No? All right, thank you very much. That brings us to item 5.2, another public hearing. The public hearing of 2018-2019 balances in excess of minimum reserve requirements, first reading. We'll open up a public hearing at 7:55. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this item?
We have one requested speaker, Melissa Lazaro.
Good evening. This is the last time I will speak, I promise, for tonight. A couple of questions, and one of them's directed at you, Mr. Little. If you can explain on page 4, it shows that move the supplemental funds to cost the additional 5 exploration at $577,611, and then under category 1,000, it lists that amount as $415,530. So there's a discrepancy there in the amount for those 5 FTE. So I didn't know if those. What else is happening for those funds, or perhaps it's to cover the residual of this year. I don't know. So something to consider as a board as you have this discussion. The other thing I thought was interesting is on page 4, we're funding $150,000 towards our music program equipment for the LCAP. And yet I know from my personal experience, a lot of the music teachers are funded through private funding, parent funding of foundations. So again, just wondering why we're spending $150,000 on equipment and we don't have teachers. Perhaps it's for a middle school or high school program where we do fund that. I'm not sure. The other thing that I think would be important for the board to take a look at, and I know that we've had this conversation when we've met one-on-one, is when we're considering the increase of special education costs and we're looking at the cost of books and supplies, I think it's important for the board to consider especially, again, I'm a broken record here, as it pertains to reading. So SIPS is a good foundational skills program to complement or to work with Benchmark that was purchased. But considering that as a sole intervention for someone, for 20% of our population that has dyslexia, it's not an effective program. So how are we purchasing these programs? Are they evidence-based? Many times I hear in meetings that it's research-based. I can research all day long and not produce evidence that shows that this particular program works. And again, going back to when we're looking at how we're funding these things, this increased cost of special education as it relates to those specifically with dyslexia, if you catch them early and you track progress with an effective evidence-based program, they're never going to end up, the majority of them will never end up in special education. And so when you look at the largest group of those that are in special education under SLD, the majority of those in SLD are kids that have reading difficulties. And if we're providing that right program, you're going to see those numbers go down. Look at the Ohio study, look at the Maryland study, look at New Jersey did in saving $100 million a year in their state by implementing an effective assessment, Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention. Please, you can reduce these costs of special education, and additionally look at the litigation costs that you guys are facing right now. Increased litigation and more on the horizon because we're not addressing this effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers to this item?
No, that's it for this topic.
Thank you. Ms. Lazar, I feel badly. I feel as though that your comments for the past two items probably should have preceded the discussion, but it's all good. Thank you for your comments. Thank you. All right. Now, public hearing will now be closed at 7:59. Mr. Little.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Zane. My mic is okay. Pursuant to Senate Bill 858, K-12 districts in California must indicate all reserve levels in excess of the maximum allowable reserve levels of a district's budget, even when the criteria for imposing the allowable maximum are not met. As per Senate Bill 751, reserve levels for K-12 districts are limited in years when 4 criteria identified in Prop 2 are met. In such cases, general fund reserves are capped at 10%. For next year, only 3 of the 4 criteria are anticipated to be met, so the cap is not in effect. However, we do comply with Senate Bill 858 and demonstrate the reserve levels in the document that's attached. We have, as we noted earlier, a beginning fund balance of $52 million. An ending fund balance. We have $1.358 million that we're anticipating in Fund 17 at year end, so our total assigned and unassigned ending fund balances equate to $53.37 million. We have a 2% economic uncertainty reserve set aside of $7,874,644, and so that that leaves a remaining balance of $45.5 million to substantiate. So obviously, the work below is to substantiate that $45.5 million. I won't read it all for you. Primarily carryover, as well as set-asides, as well as some, if you flip the page, an unassigned ending balance, which is reserved for deficit reduction. And this will come back when we bring the final budget back for adoption in on June 28th as well.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Any board member comments? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This brings us to item 6.2. Actually, I'm sorry, 6.1. I did have a request for a brief 3-minute break. Some board members took it early, but we will reconvene at 8:05. Michelle run up to the front. All right, we are reconvened at 8:08, and we are on to agenda item 6.1. Associate Superintendent Burks.
Thank you, President Zane. Tonight we are asking the board to award a contract to Standard Electronics for the upgrade and installation of security cameras at multiple school sites. In reviewing the proposals, several factors were considered in addition to the price, which included server requirements, the cost of additional cameras and hardware, reliability and functionality of the systems, and the cost of the software support moving forward. Overall, it was determined that Standard Electronics was the best match for the district based on the quality of their product and the alignment with our needs. The work is scheduled to start early summer and be completed prior to the beginning of the 18-19 school year. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion for approval to begin the conversation?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Ms. Conner-Ratcliffe.
Second?
Second by Dr. Patel. I'll now take some discussion.
I just had one question, actually. There are a significant number of cameras slated for each of the sites, and I was wondering if our latest security assessment team is helping to pick out the best spots for those cameras.
Yes, they are. We've also, Walter, our communications supervisor, worked with Guidepost, and they provided a statement and about the camera, and recommended that we continue with this server, with the equipment and everything. So they have provided input and insight on that, and will continue to do so along the scope of the work.
I just wanted to know why, thank you. I wanted to know why Oak Valley and Mesa Verde were left off. Are they in a next round?
So this is round one of a two-step process. Thank you for asking. We are looking at the sites that currently have existing equipment, and the next phase would be looking at sites that do not have existing equipment. So we broke that into a two-part phase. So this summer we'll be working towards writing a new RFP for sites that do not have that equipment.
And will that just be those two middle schools, or will they be elementary schools included in that as well?
We're looking at elementary as well.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments, questions? Been a motion by Mr. Conner-Ratcliffe, second by Dr. Patel. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Brings us to item 7.1, ratification of the Poway School Employees Association Unit 1 Office Technical Business Services and Paraprofessional, PSEA, 2016-2019 tentative agreement. Associate Superintendent Jimenez.
Thank you, President Zane. The Poway Unified School District and our classified bargaining units have completed negotiations and reached tentative agreements. This item is a recommendation to approve a tentative agreement between the district and Association Unit 1 for Office Technical and Business Services employees. The term would be from July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2019. This was overwhelmingly ratified by unit members within Unit 1. It was passed with 381 yes votes and 4 noes. This agreement would include a 2.5% ongoing salary increase effective July 1, 2018. The agreement also includes a 2% one-time payment based on unit members' actual contracted earnings for 2017-2018. And in addition to the 2% one-time payment, an additional one-time payment based on their earnings from this year would be funded from the PSEA OPEB account, which is the other post-retirement employees benefits account. The total fiscal impact will be $1.6 million one time and just over $1.3 million in an ongoing for the ongoing raises.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion to approve by Mr. Conner-Ratcliffe, second by Dr. Patel. Board member comments.
I have a question. In reading the correspondence we got from the San Diego County Office of Education attached to the AB 1200 submission, on page 3 of 7, there's the pro forma language about its effect, its sources and its effect. And under E3, we say if this is a multi-year agreement, what is the source of funding, including assumptions used to fund these obligations in future years? And we indicate NA. Is this not a multi-year agreement?
It is a multi-year agreement. However, it's 2 years in arrears and 1 year prospective. So the impacts for next fiscal year account for the third year of the multi-year, right? So once we get past next year, this is a new contract that we'll be looking at. So the AB 1200 is looking at multi-year impacts if it's a forward-looking contractual agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Further comments? All right. Ms. Beatty.
So last month I gave my delineated reasons why I couldn't support the staff raises, so I won't go through those again. They stand for the record. But it's quite simple. Students come first, everything else comes second. That's the way it's supposed to work, and that's not what happened here. The board has yet to officially approve any new program, any new hire, new counselors, etc. for our students. The CSBA sample board policy says that the governing board has the responsibility to represent the public's interest in negotiations with employee organizations. So for those reasons, I cannot support these staff raises.
Further board member comments? Mr. Connor Ratcliffe.
We just heard about, our LCAP and our budget and the new money coming in from the state next year and how with all of our LCAP input, we plan to make the most of it, frankly. And I was pleased to see all of the expansions and improvements on our existing programs and begin a few new things for our students. But I think it's important for everyone up here to remember that we can't do any of this without our, frankly, phenomenal employees. And I'm pleased to support this agreement and the next two coming up because Poway Unified needs to continue to be a place where everyone wants to work, a place where our employees are valued, they're supported, they're appreciated. And this is a place where we can all strive to do the best for our students. It all goes back to our students. It's all related. So I'm pleased to support this for those reasons.
Additional comments? Mr. Sellers.
Yeah, I wanted to make one in the spirit of full disclosure. Heretofore, I have refrained from voting on any PSEA-related contracts because, as all of you know, my wife is a member of PSEA. I am so demonstrably opposed to this sequence of events for the PFT contract as well as the two PSEA contracts and the ABSOM contracts that I feel compelled to vote on this issue. It will result in me spending an indeterminate number of nights on my couch with my dogs, but that's how strongly I feel. But I did want to at least explain in advance why I'm going to vote on this when I have never voted on a PSEA contract in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. Others? I'll simply add I'm in concurrence with Ms. O'Connor Ratcliffe's comments, but I'm also, I agree with a number of comments stated earlier by Mr. Sellers. Public school budgets are probably the least ideal type of budgets I've ever seen in my life. But public schools are government schools, so it really comes as no surprise to me. I do recognize the ebb and flow of funding out of Sacramento, out of Washington, D.C., and what the impact that has had on our district budgets over the years, even prior to my time on this board. I've seen the structural budget deficit, which I really dislike seeing, but I've seen that decrease over the years from $15 million to projected as I hate to say low, it's not low, of $8 million per year. I'm using round numbers. I have, unfortunately, every reason to believe that those numbers are going to change again. in the years ahead because of the uncertainty of the numbers that come out of, again, Sacramento and elsewhere. And I think it's incumbent upon us, we've talked about it before, to maintain quality teachers and employees in the district. And I think that when I said something similar in the last meeting, when we as a board, as a governing board, arguably can get away with, probably much to the chagrin of some of the union leadership out there, I'll say get away with a 2.5% increase in salaries when other districts elsewhere are striking because they're not getting 8 or 9%. I think that's also reflective of the quality of employees that we have in Poway Unified School District, that they're willing to carry on and continue to do their good work with a 2.5% increase. So, because the alternative is, as I look at some of the numbers that's been presented here and other nights before, and I again mentioned this last time, if any of the bargaining units were to declare impasse because they want more out of us than 2.5%, they'll take this to the Public Employees Relation Board, and it is within their purview. They will award more than 2.5% to the bargaining unit, and we will have ended up spending more as a district on salary increases than what we're proposing to approve this evening and what we've improved in the past. So I think it's incumbent upon everybody to take a very big picture view on this. I don't like the look of structural budget deficits any more than Mr. Sellers or Ms. Beatty, but I do think that it's, again, incumbent upon us to ensure that the district is moving forward in a positive direction and doing the best, very best with what we can, and work to identify new revenue sources, identify places where we can cut expenses. And yeah, there is going to be a little bit of hope in there. It's not the best, it's not a strategy, but there is a little bit of hope that things will improve. The funding that we get out of Sacramento, but I don't think that that hope is entirely misplaced considering what we've seen in past years. It just ebbs and flows, and I don't like being at the whim of Sacramento in terms of our funding, but it is what it is, and I think that, again, we just need to do what we can at the local level. I think the DBAC is doing good work, coming forward with some great recommendations. I think it's not the end of the recommendations that we'll receive and that we'll implement. So for all of these reasons, I am going to vote yes on this evening and the subsequent items on the agenda. So with that, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, let the record reflect. Those in favor, Mr. Connor Ratcliffe, Dr. Patel, myself. Opposed? Ms. Beatty and Mr. Sellers. Next item is 7.1, ratification of the Poway School Employees Association. 7.2, ratification of the Poway School Employees Association Unit 2 Operation Support Services, PSCA 2016-2019 Tentative Agreement. Associate Superintendent Jimenez.
Thank you, President Zane. Similarly, this is a recommendation to approve a tentative agreement between our district and Unit 2 for our Operation Support Services employees. For the equivalent term of 2016 through 2019, this as well was overwhelmingly ratified by their unit members, with 119 employees voting yes and 2 voting no. The agreement also includes a 2.5% ongoing salary increase effective July 1st, 2018, and a total 3% one-time payment based on the 2017-2018 earnings, structured in the same way as Unit 1. The fiscal impact will be $604,957 one time and $504,131 in ongoing for the term of the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Dr. Patel.
Second.
Second by Ms. O'Connor Ratcliffe. Board member discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Let the record reflect. Motion carries. Ms. O'Connor Ratcliffe, Dr. Patel, and myself. Opposed? Ms. Beatty and Mr. Sellers. Next item, 7.3, compensation on the salary schedule for the Association of Poway School Managers, APSM, of 2.5%, a one-time payment of 3% commensurate to all of the bargaining units. Associate Superintendent, Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, President Zane. Yes, as well, similarly, this is a recommendation to approve an increase in compensation between the school district and our Association of Poway School Manager employees, commensurate with the increases that are being given for our bargaining units. This agreement also includes a 2.5% ongoing salary increase effective July 1st, 2018, and it also includes a total 3% one-time payment based on the employee's actual contracted earnings during the 2017-2018 school year. That 3% is 2% funded through our general fund and 1% from the OPEB account for the APSM employees. The total fiscal impact would be just over 1.1 million in one time and $919,004 ongoing annually.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
This motion to approve by Ms. O'Connell-Ratcliffe,
Second?
second by Dr. Patel. Board member discussion? Ms. Beatty.
Mr. Jimenez, I have one question. The OPEB account, so this is the our employees' post-retirement health account. And since the beginning of my tenure here, I was always told that management didn't have a funded OPEB account, that it was basically a pay-as-you-go. So is that correct? Because if it is, there is no account from which to take the 1% bonus.
I'm going to ask Director Ramiro to help if I misstate this, but there is a small balance in Fund 67 that is set aside for the APSM OPEB liability. How it got there, I don't know. I'd have to ask Director Ramiro to comment on that.
Sounds about par for the course.
Thank you.
So just like other bargaining unit, we contribute as to the OPEB account. For APSAM, 0.68% of total salaries is being contributed to their OPEB. And for the past year, yes, because of those retirees, the pay as you go is almost the same as the contribution. But since I don't know how many years, they've been keeping a balance which is enough for the 1% to be funded. So in short, they have, can't remember on top of my head, but they have enough to cover the 1% because of those remaining balance. So the contribution to their OPEB account, which is 0.68% of total salaries, is more than what is the pay as you go annually for the APSAM units.
So what's the 1%? How much is in the fund right now, and what's the 1% amount total to in dollars?
I don't know that I brought those numbers with me this evening. I think we shared those with the board prior. I'm checking what I have here.
I don't believe APSAM's ever been
10.
shared
Let's
because,
see.
as I said, my impression had been that it was kind of a pay-go.
So at the board budget workshop in April, we shared this document on page 10 of your binder. So the beginning balance, we're projecting an ending fund balance in APSAM's OPEB account of about $328,000.
Oh, are you talking about the board budget workshop binder? So on which tab section?
It's the tab Other, labeled Other, and it's page 10. So we did the breakdown of each bargaining unit's OPEB funds as of June 30th, 2017.
Okay.
So, Joy, do you know 1%? What is 1% of APSAM?
So the APSAM total is $187,000. Is that correct?
I'm looking at the total balance of $328,000.
Okay, I see that. Yep, I see that.
So just to reiterate Joy's point, so this balance was built up in those years where what we were contributing exceeded the pay-as-you-go amount.
Yes.
And now that's about a break-even proposition.
And I guess the only other, well, first question was, what is 1%? Then how much is being drained from that? And 2, is it actuarially sound, the remaining amount?
So if you look at AB 1200, well, it's around 309, if I remember it right, the 3% for APSUM, and the balance in their OPEB account is 328,000, because I remember Mr. Little asking me if there's enough, and it's, yeah, there's barely enough. That's what I...
So it's about a third, so you're saying 3% is about 300,000, so about a third of the OPEB account is being drained then?
No, all is being drained.
I think 1% is about $300,000.
Well, no, because only 1% bonus is coming out of OPEB.
Yes,
right?
so which
That's
is
correct.
300.
Oh. 1% is 300. So
Yes.
it's, okay, so we're draining
Draining
completely.
Washington.
the
Draining,
OPEB
yes.
account. Well, they're not supposed to be.
It's basically a pay-as-you-go model moving forward for APSUM.
For APSUM.
Which is not ideal, right?
It's not ideal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I believe we had a motion and a second on this, correct? Was it Ms. O'Connor-Ratcliffe with the motion, Dr. Patel with the second? Further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Ms. O'Connor-Ratcliffe, Dr. Patel, and myself. Opposed, Ms. Beatty and Mr. Sellers. Brings us to item 8.1, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Phillips.
So this is our last meeting before our 2017-18 school year ends, and I wanted to thank everyone, staff, students, parents, and the board members for all of everyone's hard work in completing another successful year. Kudos to the Associate Superintendent Little and Dr. Robertson for their teams on the LCAP and the budget that were brought forward today. Thank you as well to all of our stakeholders who participated in the LCAP forums, as well as those who have provided public feedback before our LCAP and budgets were adopted by the board on are being adopted by the board on June 28th. Today also happens to be Dr. Robertson's last board meeting with us. So after 30 years of serving at PUSD, Dr. Robertson is pursuing an opportunity with Valley Center. She will be missed, and I want to thank her for her vast knowledge and limitless dedication on behalf of students, families, staff, and the district. We wish you well, and we look forward to seeing the great things that you will accomplish there. PUSD is PUSD is proud of its many effective and innovative programs benefiting students. This year, we're nominating several of them for CSBA's Golden Bell Awards. CSBA's Golden Bell Awards promote excellence in education by recognizing outstanding programs in school districts throughout California. School districts are allowed to submit 3 entries, and so we'll be submitting the entry number 1 on our Exploration program, which is a district program bringing PE, VAPA, and STEM curriculum to all of our elementary schools 13 times a year. A team of 20 teachers arrive at each campus to teach standards-based lessons, while the science teachers are released to collaborate in grade level teams. Explorations come about from a need identified in our LCAP forum to ensure equity, access, and across the district when it came to providing innovative and engaging learning experiences to a very diverse student population with a limited budget. We are nominating Exploration for the Golden Bell, Equity, and Accessibility category, which highlights programs that strive to break down barriers that have prevented student access to equitable education, including those that promote a more equitable distribution of resources. We're also nominating Studio 701, which is our high school internship program for students who have an interest in pursuing film, broadcast, and other digital media careers. The goal is to provide authentic workplace learning experiences and mentoring for students while they produce monthly videos highlighting district partnerships and programs for our Board of Education meetings, as well as larger stakeholder audiences. We're nominating Studio 701 for the Career and Technical Education category, which includes the display of successful models and techniques focused on efforts to prepare students for both career and college, such as linked learning, career pathways, regional occupation programs, and career exploration opportunities. We're also submitting an application for Design 39 Campus. Exploration classes offered students an opportunity to try out or explore a new type of learning, skill, or experience, which can develop into a focus area or deep dive if the students choose to do so. Examples include Korean language, mosaic art, green architecture. This allows students the freedom to discover, then extend their passions and interests into new ideas and innovations. We are nominating D39 for the Expanded Learning and Engagement category, which includes programs offered during expanded learning time that meets the needs of students and engages them in activities to strengthen their human potential. I want to thank the board members for your ongoing support of all of our excellent programs and wish us luck that all of our nominees, and hope that the judges also agree that we deserve a golden bell for these 3 programs. Finally, I want to congratulate our graduates who will walk across the stage next week to receive their hard-earned diplomas. It really is our favorite time of year, and I look forward to celebrating with all of our graduates this year, as well as our board members who will be attending all of the graduation ceremonies at our various high schools as well and middle schools. So this concludes my report. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Phelps, and thank you for your years of service, Dr. Robertson, and congratulations. And that brings us to the end of our open session. The board is going to reconvene and close, but the only remaining item on our agenda is there will be nothing to report out. So we will adjourn the open session at 8:35, and see you again on Thursday, June 28th at 6 p.m. Thank you very much.